Budapest Storytelling Association has grown into a network of local guilds that promote storytelling and help develop storytellers. There are 14 guilds across Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma that help promote storytelling, offer storytelling workshops, and have storytellers that come. And each year, this festival features our rising stars, which are showcasing talent from some of those guilds. There is a concert tomorrow at 4 o'clock that features our rising stars. We encourage you, if you have a ticket for tomorrow's festival, that you come and check it out. Our next teller was one of those rising stars in 2024, and she's back to join us again tonight. Music is a really big part of creating suspense when we go to scary movies. You can't help but hear that dun 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 dun. You know something's going to happen, right? And so Nicki Cohen is a professor emeritus of music therapy, and she often brings music and singing to bring that into her telling. So please welcome Nicki Cohen.
Hello. Thank you for coming. The innkeeper's wife woke up and found out that her husband was not in bed. That worried her, because she's usually the one who gets up first. So she thought she'd walk around the house and try to find him. He was the one who took care of all the money, and he was much friendlier than she, so he would talk to all the customers in the inn. She was known as being stingy and shut down, but she was a great cook, and so she spent most of her time in the kitchen cooking, and that worked out really well for her and her husband. But right now, she couldn't find her husband. So she went downstairs to the inn and walked around from room to room, and she finally got to the front parlor, and she saw that he was indeed there. He was sitting on a couch, he was bent over, and his hands were raised up towards his chest. And he was dead. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know how to breathe, how to think, how to feel. She just stood there and finally decided maybe she'd better leave and come back. So she took a blanket and put it over his long legs and his torso and his bald head and tucked it around the back, tucked it in, and decided she would come back because she had this question on her mind, and it was how can she bury her husband without having to pay for the funeral? She couldn't figure this out, and this was really eating at her. So she left and closed the door with a soft little click, and she heard Brokaw the butcher's voice coming from the kitchen. Now, he came every week, he sold them food, and he was probably her best friend. She didn't have very many friends, but he was one of them. And when she heard his voice, all of a sudden, she knew what she could do so that she didn't have to pay for the funeral. So she went to the kitchen and she said, "Burakel, my husband's traveling. Can we pay you next week for everything?" "Why, sure." And then she gave him a glass of her homemade wine. Not only was she a great cook, but she was a wonderful winemaker. And she would pour the wine, he would drink the wine, she would pour the wine, he would drink the wine. And at first, he got drunk, and then he got very drunk. And then he got too drunk. And she had to help him walk to one of the guest rooms, and she said, why don't you stay here and sleep this off, and when you're feeling better, then you can leave. And she gave him a sleeping gown, a nice white, warm sleeping gown to put on. And when he had settled in and fallen back to sleep, she went back to the parlor. And there was her husband all covered up with a blanket. She laid him out on the couch on his back, and then she went and got a black tablecloth that her grandmother had given her, and she ripped some holes in it, and she covered his torso and his head with the black tablecloth. And then she put a burial garment on his body so that from the feet up to the waist, he had a burial garment, and from the waist up above his head was a black tablecloth. And then she, when she was done doing that, she went and contacted the wife of Burkle the butcher. She wrote a little note. It said, I am so sorry to tell you this, but your husband was discovered lying on the road by the inn, and it looks like he was attacked by a wild animal. And I think he's dead. And I want to send my sincerest condolences to you and offer anything I can do to help get through the funeral and the graveyard service. And the wife of Burkle the butcher received this message and became absolutely hysterical. And she sent a message back to the wife of the innkeeper saying, yes, I'm going to need so much help I can't imagine doing anything tomorrow. You see, a lot of the people in this town were Jewish. And in Jewish law, when someone passes away, you have to bury them within 24 to 48 hours. So there was very little time in order to take care of all this. And when she got this message, when the wife of the innkeeper got this message, then she contacted the burial committee of the synagogue and said, I have someone here who's going to be buried tomorrow. I need a coffin, and we're not going to have a ritual washing or prayer, any kind of meeting, because he was traumatized. He was killed by an animal. So we don't have to worry about that. But we do need the coffin. So knock, knock, knock on the door. Here comes the burial committee carrying a coffin. She takes him to the front parlor, says, here is Burkle the butcher. Please put him in the coffin. They do that very gently, put the lid on, and walk back towards the synagogue. After they leave, she runs upstairs to check on Burkle the butcher. Burkle, how you doing? He was out like a light. There was no waking him up. And she just hoped that he would stay out like a light until tomorrow. And so next day, the funeral. And Burkle was a very popular person in the town. Everyone loved him. He was generous and funny. And so a lot of people were there, and they were holding each other around the shoulder, and they were swaying, and they were praying, and they were singing. And the wife of the innkeeper was standing in back of the wife of Burkle the butcher. In case the woman stumbled or fell over, she could pick her up and help her out. And that was needed during the Kaddish, the prayer for the dead, the woman just kind of fell apart. And so she was there to help her for that. And finally, the funeral was over and the graveyard service was over and everyone was getting really exhausted. And the rabbi said, everyone go home and rest. It's been a really rough day so far. And so everyone left. And ironically, right at that time, Burkle the butcher woke up. And he said, where am I? And what am I wearing? And where are my shoes? And he went around the inn trying to find someone to talk to ask these questions, but they were all at his funeral. So he went up the road to his house, and he found that the door was locked, which was very unusual. So he said, Meine Schöne, let me in. It's your Burkle. I'm cold. I'm hungry. Let me in. Well, his wife, his poor wife, was standing in back of the door, terrified, because they had just buried him. And so she yelled out, go away, Burkle. You don't belong here. Go away. Go back to the cemetery. We just buried you there. Go there. Well, he usually listens to what his wife tells him. So he went to the cemetery, and he looked around, and nothing was there except this freshly dug grave. And he thought, I wonder who died. And he walked down the hill towards the grave, and there was a sign, and he read it. It said, here lies Burkle the butcher. May his memory be a blessing. Burkle no! And he yelled and he threw himself down on the grave and he tossed and he turned and he grieved for his life. He woke up the next morning, he was freezing, he was hungry. He was lying on top of the grave, and he propped himself up and he said, I have a question. If I'm freezing and I'm hungry, then how can I be dead? No one answered him. He thought about his mother, who's used to sing him songs that made him feel better. She sang him a song in Yiddish about children by the fireside learning to read. He thought about this and it made him feel better just thinking about it. Auf im Pricketschiff brennt a Firewall und ein Sturm ist heiß und der Rabbi lehrt kleine Kinderlech dem Olive Base. Und der Rabbi lehrt kleine Kinderlech dem Olive Base. Yai, die, 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 yai, die, 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 die. Up at the top of the hill, two women were walking by. They were carrying baskets of freshly baked bread, and they heard an odd singing, chanting sound coming from the cemetery. And they looked down the hill, and what they saw was the ghost of Burkle the butcher. Ah! They threw their baskets, and they ran. Now, Burkle knew these ladies, and he went, hello, ladies. But it didn't help anything. But he walked up the hill and he looked in the baskets, and there were some very warm, sweet honey buns in those baskets. And he sat down and he ate and he felt a little better, but he knew he had to do something because he was going to freeze if he spent another night sleeping on top of the grave. So he went to see the rabbi. He went to the rabbi's house, he knocked on the door, he said, Rebbe, it's Bracha the butcher, I am alive. Repeat, I am alive. Well, the rabbi was doing the same thing Barachel's wife had done, which was hiding behind the door because he had officiated the funeral. He thought he would just stay there for a while. But Barachel told him the story of how he had gone to the inn, how he had gotten drunk, and he can't remember very much else other than that. And the rabbi listened to this story, and he said, I think I know what's going on here. It has to do with the innkeeper's stingy wife. And so he opened the door, he put out his arms to Barachel, he gave him a huge hug, he gave him a cape with a hood to warm him up, and he gave him some hot, sweet tea to warm him up. And when they were done with that, the rabbi said, we need to go see the innkeeper's wife. And the rabbi walked out the door, Barachel in his cape walked out the door behind him. Now the rest of the townspeople had rested, and they were looking out the windows, which they tend to do, and they said, what's the rabbi doing? Where's he going? And who's the stranger in back of him with the cape? And so all the people, one by one, two by two, started following the rabbi and the stranger up the hill. There was this procession going on, up towards the inn. And they got up to the top of the hill. Everyone in the town was up there. And they formed a circle around the front door. And the rabbi knocked on the door. And the innkeeper's wife opened the door. And she looked out and she saw all these people. And then she saw Barachel, who took down his hood and went. And she felt very dizzy and wavering, and then the rabbi said, my dear, where is your husband? And she threw herself down on the ground and she screamed and she cried and she told everyone what she had done and she asked everyone for their forgiveness. And a few days later, the burial committee made her pay to dig up her husband and put him in a fresh grave. And then she gave that grave to Barachel and his wife for whenever they would meet him. And every night, she would go visit her husband's grave. She would stand at the edge of the grave. She would tell him about whatever food she made that day, and how good it was, and how she wished she could have eaten it. And she would wait for the sun to rise, putting her arms up and watching as each star vanished. Yai die 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 die. Yai die 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 die. Yai die 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 die. Yai die die die.
Tony Hardman is a retired librarian from the Oklahoma Panhandle. On Halloween, when the shadows dance in Goodwill, at the No Man's Land Museum, you can find him sharing chilling stories of spirits and ghosts. Please welcome Tony Hardman.
Abraham Lincoln was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, president in the history of the United States. But he made one very serious mistake. And it was because of this mistake that he set off a chain of events that makes it possible for me to tell this story. You see, the mistake that he made was at the end of his first year in office, he appointed a man, John W. Dawson, to be the governor of the Utah Territory. Dawson has the record of having the shortest term of any governor in the history of the entire U.S. And it was because of the things that he did as governor, he is rated as the worst territorial governor ever appointed. You see, the mistake that Lincoln made by appointing Dawson as governor was Dawson was a notorious womanizer. He liked to make proposals to women in very aggressive and forceful manner. He was a man who did not like to hear the word no. When Dawson arrived at Fillmore, which was the territorial capital, right before the end of his 3-week term, he made an aggressive, indecent proposal to a young Latter-day Saint widow, who responded by thrashing him with a fire shovel. Once she knew she was safe from Dawson's clutches, she ran out into the street and she complained to the local residents of Fillmore. Dawson had just enough time to flee to the territorial capitol building, and he was told that if he valued his life, he would leave the territory as quickly as possible. Dawson only had one other federal employee that he could contact. That was a man named Ephraim Hanks, who was the mail carrier. He told Dawson to ride in a mail coach. That way it would be more private, nobody would know that he was leaving. Hanks accompanied him to a small town called Mountain Dell, where he figured by then Dawson would be safe. He told Dawson to take another mail coach to the next train station and then take the train to Washington, D.C. However, neither Dawson nor Hanks realized that the coach was being followed by 7 vigilantes. After Hanks departed, Dawson was severely beaten. Now, the sheriff's report was that even though he had been beaten, he had not been robbed. He still had all of his money and all of his possessions. However, according to the sheriff's report, Dawson had been deprived of 2 very precious jewels. In short, he had been castrated. Dawson was able to arrive in Washington, D.C., relatively unhurt, minus his 2 jewels. And despite the circumstances, no one pitied him. No one took his side, mind you. But he was still a federal employee. And because of that, A posse of federal marshals was sent to the territorial government and ordered to find the vigilantes, who were now fugitives of justice and branded as outlaws. The marshals found the 7 vigilantes in Salt Lake City. 4 of them were arrested. 3 of them were shot and killed while fleeing from the marshals in Salt Lake City. One of those men was Moroni Clausen. Now, Moroni Clausen came from a very respectable Fillmore family, but because he died an outlaw, the Clausen family did not claim the body. As a result, a peace officer took pity on Clausen, bought him a suit, and personally supervised his burial in the Salt Lake City cemetery. A few weeks went by. The Clausen family had a change of heart. They decided that they wanted their son buried in the family plot. They sent Moroni's brother to claim the body. He was met there by Henry Heath, the man who bought the suit. And there at the grave, they exhumed the coffin. George Clausen wanted the coffin opened to make sure that it was indeed his brother inside. They opened the coffin. Now, Clausen's body was definitely inside. But instead of the traditional position of being face up, dressed in clothes, arms across the chest, he was face down, stark naked. And immediately, George Clausen wanted to know what bizarre rituals his brother had been subjected to. Now, he assured him, I buried him. I bought the suit myself. He was buried in a suit in the proper way. That's when they realized Moroni Clausen's grave had been robbed. There was only one suspect, but they had no proof. He immediately launched an investigation. He went to the local judge, Elias Smith, and he asked what he needed to do. And the judge says, well, if I were you, I would search your only suspect's home. So he took the sexton of the cemetery with him, went to the suspect's home, whose name was Jean Baptiste. Baptiste was not at home, but his wife invited them in and told them to look around. The 2 men noticed some very suspicious boxes. They opened them to find out that all of these boxes were filled with burial clothes, including the burial suit of Moroni Clausen. What was even more distressing was they had found that bits of coffin had been chopped up to be used as firewood. Heath was not happy. He had just lost a daughter. And the idea that his daughter's grave had been violated was extremely upsetting to him. They went back to the cemetery where Baptiste was digging a grave for a burial scheduled later that day. Heath accused him, and Baptiste claimed that he was innocent. But Heath was so enraged, he jumped in the grave, he grabbed Baptiste by the throat, and it was then that Baptiste confessed to his crime. He'd asked him if he had violated his daughter's grave, to which Baptiste said no. Baptiste was then taken to the jail to await trial. But Heath stated later that if he had confessed to robbing his daughter's grave, he would have killed Baptiste there on the spot. When word had spread of the grave robberies, because it was found out that he had robbed over 300 graves. Now, the people of Salt Lake City believed that when you were resurrected in your burial clothes. When they found out that all of their departed loved ones was going to heaven stark naked, they were not very happy. Brigham Young, the leader of the Latter-day Saint people, stated in a sermon that execution was too good for Baptiste and recommended that he be exiled instead. Judge Smith, who presided over the trial, agreed. When Baptiste had been found guilty, he was branded with indelible ink the words "grave robber" across his forehead, and he was sentenced to be exiled to Fremont Island in the middle of the Great Salt Lake. Now, Fremont Island was owned by two brothers, Dan and Henry Miller. They were cattlemen, and they had their herd graze on Fremont Island. They had a shed there which had provisions and food in it, and every 3 weeks they would check on the herd. It was the Miller brothers who transported Baptiste to Fremont Island. 3 weeks later they came back. They did see Baptiste wandering the island, but the shed had been broken into and most of the food was gone. 3 weeks later they returned. They found a slaughtered calf, which Baptiste had obviously killed to use for food, and they noticed that one side of the shed was missing. Baptiste was nowhere to be found. They figured that he used the side of the shed as a makeshift raft to escape. A manhunt was immediately started. They searched everywhere, and they figured with the tattoo on his head that people would be able to easily recognize him. But no sign of Baptiste was found. He had simply disappeared. 28 years later, at the mouth of the Jordan River, which is the river that flows between Utah Lake and the Great Salt Lake, they found a skeleton with a ball and chain on one leg. Many believed that the mystery had finally been solved, but Heath and the Miller brothers both stated that when Baptiste was transported to Fremont Island, he was not shackled. To this day, we have no idea who that skeleton was. And to this day, the mysterious disappearance of Baptiste remains exactly that, a mystery. But Baptiste was not content to just have disappeared and made everybody wonder what happened to him. It is said that on the eastern shores of the Great Salt Lake, where Fremont Island can be seen in the distance, just as the sun begins to set, one can see a man walking along those shores. He is dressed completely in black. He is hunched over, and he seems to be carrying with him a bundle of wet clothes, smelling of rancid mold. But the legend doesn't stop there. It is said that if one sees this apparition, one should not remain. One is to walk away, run if they have to. Because if you don't, the next bundle of clothes that the apparition could be carrying just might be yours.
And that's the naked truth. Sir, We would like to recognize, as we're recognizing our sponsors, especially Dennis and Emily Brock, for establishing the David Brock Youth Fund to support the development of up-and-coming youth tellers, teaching students how to tell stories. It's the work of teachers, guilds, and especially school librarians and storytellers. I'm sure if you ask many of the tellers that will be here this weekend when they first started telling stories, it will be the stories that they told when they were children. There is a special youth storytelling concert. The David Brock Youth Storytelling Concert is Saturday morning at 9 o'clock in the morning right here. There'll be 8 of our featured youth storytellers as well as one of our featured tellers, Joel Benizzi. So we encourage you to come. Another one of our storytellers is a retired librarian, as many storytellers are. Minetta Smith is a retired elementary school librarian. She's a member of the North 40 Guild. Now, she considers herself a bit of a foodie, but would not enjoy the entree featured in her story of Al Packer, the Colorado cannibal. Minetta Smith.
Good evening. I first heard the story sitting around a campfire on Gold Mountain in Colorado, the legend of Al Packer, the Colorado cannibal. Now, he had a very ordinary upbringing. He was a native of Pennsylvania. His father was a cabinet maker. He himself was a shoemaker. And during the war between the states, he joined the Union Army twice. But after 2 to 3 months, both times, he was let go from the Army because of medical reasons. And he kind of wandered around a bit, not really doing very much. And then after the war itself, as with many men, they were roaming around and looking for different opportunities. And he ended up in Utah, there in the mining community, looking for gold, but never really finding it. But the lure of gold was always there. And then in 1873, there was word that reached them that gold had been found around Gunnison, Colorado. And a group of 21 men set out at that time, hoping to make their way and make their fortune. About the time that they got to Montrose, Colorado, they met with the Ute Indians there, and one of the leaders, Chief Ouray himself, advised that it was best that they wait there throughout the winter. He had a feeling that the winter was going to be very brutal, very rough, and that they should wait for the spring. But oh, that lure of gold. Al Packer did not want to wait. He wanted to be one of the first there. And so he convinced 5 others that he knew the way, he would be able to lead them across the way, and that they could be the first to arrive. Well, Ouray again warned them, wait, but they didn't listen. Now, they were in Montrose, Colorado, and they thought that Gunnison was about 40 miles away, when in reality, it was more like 80. They packed goods for 10 days, which they thought would be adequate, and then they set off. And so Al Packer, along with Shannon Bell, James Humphrey, Frank Miller, and Israel Swan, George Noon and Israel Swan all set out. Now, they should have listened to Ouray, because just as he predicted, winter hit with a force. There was blinding sleet, everything was freezing, there was snow, and pretty soon they were snowbound and completely lost when they reached the shores of Lake San Cristobal. Well, it didn't take long for their supplies to be used up. They even resorted to boiling their moccasins for a thin soup, but even that was gone. And that is where our story takes a change. Now, Packer's story changed from time to time, but he said that Israel Swan, the oldest of the group, was the first to die. And, well, they were starving and there was meat, and that is when the slicing and the roasting began. They partook of their friend. And a little bit later, James Humphrey passed away. No one really said what happened, but once again, the others were starving and wondering what to do, and again, he provided subsistence for his friends. Al Packer went out one day searching, helping to get around, hoping to find some things. And then when he came back, another of us had passed away. He thinks that perhaps Bill had killed him. But again, there was succulent flesh and meals to be had. And as time went on, they still needed to eat. And so they did. Now, we were now down to two, Shannon Bell and Al Packer. Al Packer, went out searching for some food, hoping to catch an animal, hoping to catch something. And when he came back, he said that Shannon Bell rushed at him with a hatchet and he shot him. Now, you know what happened to Shannon Bell. That was also the last meal that Packer could have. And so time went on, and finally the spring thaw came, and Al Packer made his way to the Los Pinos Indian Agency. He arrived there, and some people who had known him in the past kind of looked at him, and as he told these tales of how he had gotten separated from the others, and he didn't know what had happened, and it had been such a hard winter, some of the Native Americans looked at him and thought, he's a little plump to have been starving to death. And so slowly things began to evolve, and the authorities did not believe Packer, but they didn't know quite what to do with him. They did keep questioning him, and some others realized that Packer was pretty wealthy at the moment. He had $133, and everyone knew that Packer had never had any money at all, hardly. Well, at this time, there also was an illustrator from Harper's Magazine. He had come to illustrate the mining companies there around Colorado, and as he was going around, he was going up to Gold Mountain, and he stumbled across the grisly scene. The scene of skeletons and rotting flesh. There was a head missing, and he illustrated all of that and took that information back to the authorities, and Packer was arrested. But in a few days, he was able to escape, and for 9 years, Packer was on the run. Now, when they brought him back originally for his trial, as he was telling what had happened, he was never accused of cannibalism, only of manslaughter of Shannon Bell for shooting him. But the judge, when he was able to do the sentencing, looked at him and said, Al Packer, there was only 7 Democrats in Tinseltown County. You've done 5 of them. Well, and he promised him that he was going to hang him by the neck until he was dead, dead, dead. But that did not happen. Al Packer was just sentenced to 40 years in prison. And 3 years later, he won a retrial because of a technicality. You see, the murder had happened when Colorado was a territory. But then the trial took place when it was a state. And so he had 40 years to serve. After 20 years, he was given a pardon. And he went about. He was a mining supervisor again. Some people regarded him as a kindly old man. He loved telling stories of his adventures to the children of the town, and they liked him. Now, he eventually passed away in 1907. But you know, if you ever go to Lake City, Colorado, take a moment, stop by the Al Packer massacre site, Pay your respects to Shannon Bell, James Humphrey, Fred Miller, George Noon, and Israel Swan. And then go to the Hinsdale Museum. And there you'll see different artifacts from the Packers. And then you'll even see a dollhouse that he made for his landlady's granddaughter when he was living there. And then go there on the boardwalk to the San Juan Soda Shop and order the Al Packer Special. It is a delicious banana split. And when you finish it, you'll get a button that says, "I can't believe I ate the whole thing."
Our next teller shares stories of magic and superstitions from the Hawaiian Islands with traditional tales of Japan and Korea. Now, growing up, he was terrified of ghost stories and scary stories, but now he seeks out folks who have true supernatural, paranormal experiences for the Spooked podcast. For the first time on the Texas Festival stage, please welcome Alton Chung.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Glenn Grant collected the weird stories from Hawaii for over 30 years. And it's with the permission of the state I can share the story with you. Now, Glenn Grant is a storyteller, and he was hired out as a storyteller to go and tell stories at different functions. This was the 50th reunion of a private school in Hawaii, and he was hired for an hour. He spoke the story for an hour, and then after he was done, a man named John Witterhouse stood up and began telling a personal story. John Witterhouse is what they call a kama aina haole. Kama aina, person of the land. Haole, Caucasian. Kama aina haole is a Caucasian person who grew up in the islands. He said that in 1959, he had taken his family on this amazing vacation. They had rented one of those big aluminum Airstream trailers and a rental truck, and they went up and down the Kona coast, the big island of Hawaii, camping on the different beach sites everywhere. It's probably the best 2 months they had as a vacation for a family. And toward the end, as summer had gone on, the beaches got more and more crowded, and they couldn't find a place to park that huge Airstream trailer, so they turned inland along the Mamalahoa Highway, and they came to a place called Manuka State Park. They pulled in. The sun was, going down, and there were people around. But by the time they got their trailer kind of leveled and set up, water attached, they were the only ones there. Well, they had dinner, they played some card games, and they decided to go to sleep. Now, there was John Waterhouse's wife and his son and his daughter. Now, the back part of the Airstream trailer, that was the main bedroom. That's where John Waterhouse and his wife slept, and his kids were in the front part of the trailer. And it's about 10:30 at night. They shut down the lights. And then start hearing, "Hey kids," must be the kids knocking away. "Hey kids, knock it off! Hey Dad, it's not us!" What do you think it is? I don't know. He's thinking to himself, well, maybe we parked under a tree that I didn't notice, and the wind's blowing and things are falling on the Airstream trailer, or maybe there's the wind is picked up and little rocks are punching against the side of the trailer. I said, "What do you think it could be?" "I don't know." All of a sudden, bang, 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 whoa! They jumped out. All of a sudden, someone's running around the outside of the Airstream trailer, banging on the side with a baseball bat. The kids bulk up. They meet in the center. They turn on the lights. "What's going on?" "I don't know." It's bang, 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 bang. And someone's running around the outside of the trailer. It must be maybe some kids are outside. They're trying to terrorize us. He's looking around. He finds a crowbar. He finds a flashlight. And he says, "Okay." He tells his wife, "I'm going to go outside. You lock this door. Don't let anyone in except me." And he can hear that banging on the outside of this airstream trailer. He opens up the door and he steps down onto the tarmac of Minetta State Park. And as soon as he does, shh, dead quiet. He shot his flashlight, he's looking around, there's no cars in the parking lot. He shot his flashlight over by the restroom, there's nobody there. He walks around the trailer looking around, there's nobody there. They're the only ones in this park. He didn't park next to a tree. And it's dead calm. Knocks on the door, he gets inside. His wife says, who's outside? There's nobody outside. What do you mean there's nobody outside? We're the only ones here. Well, they don't know what to do now. Everyone's spooked. So, John Woodhouse's wife and his 2 kids, they all go in the back bedroom. Now that old bed, they're like packed like sardines in this little bed. And then they shut down the lights. About 15 minutes go by, and they're all trying to fall asleep. And all of a sudden, bang, 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 oh, they jump out again. Someone's again running around the outside of this trailer, banging on the sides. And they run into the center part, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 like someone's up on the roof, banging on top of the roof. And all of a sudden, the trailer's beginning to sway back and forth, and then bang, 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 like someone's underneath the trailer, hitting up. They had no idea. There's no point going outside. They know that they're the only people there. They don't know what to do. They hold hands, they pray. And they pray until dawn. The sunset's coming up, the sky turns a little gray, and all of a sudden, shh, dead quiet. From 10:30 at night till 6 o'clock in the morning, they prayed. And now it was finally quiet. John Woodhouse gets out, he looks around, there's nobody there. Great. He starts hooking up the trailer to the truck. His son says, Dad, I gotta go. Son, can't you hold it? Dad, I've been holding it all night long, I gotta go. Oh, hurry up. He gets the trailer hooked up. All of a sudden he hears his son say, Hey, Dad. He looks over the restroom. His son didn't go to the restroom. He went out in the bushes. Hey, get over here. No, Dad, you gotta come, you gotta come. What? Gotta come over here. Look at this, look at this. And he walks to the edge of the tarmac. And there at the edge of the tarmac is a low stone wall. They must have missed it in the dark. And inside this low stone wall, there was these 2 pieces of basalt. There's words punched into the side, but writing's all worn and weathered, they can't read it. Dad, what's that? And his son points at the base of these 2 pieces of basalt rock. And there are 2 pools of mist. They're roiling. And as they watch, these 2 pools of mist roll up. And then dissipate. Let's get out of here. He opens up the trailer, everyone piles in the truck, they take off down the road. But John Woodhouse is kind of a curious guy. They stop at the first general store, he pulls in, he goes to the guy behind the counter, what can you tell me about Minetta State Park up the road? Huh? Oh, you mean Obake Park? Obake? Yeah, it's Japanese for ghosts. Hey, you didn't stay there last night, did you? Well, yeah. Man, when you go to learn, you don't see any local people around, you don't stay. Did you put food on the graves? No, man, I bet you they kept you all night long. Man, you gotta put food on the graves, man. Otherwise, they're gonna bother you all night long. You gotta respect the dead. This was Glenn Grant's one of his favorite stories because it was a first-hand account of some ghostly happenings. And he told it for a while. This was in 1990, he wrote the story. He wasn't able to get to the big island of Hawaii to go and verify the story till like May of 1994. And he finally had some time in his schedule. He flies over to the big island, to Kona, rents a car, and starts driving up along the Mamaloa Highway to go to Minetta State Park. And he thinks to himself, well, if the graves aren't there, then this is just a nice story. But if the graves are there, this is like verification. And he gets up to the park, and there's a sign someone has put there, Hawaiian graves. And he walks up there, there's this whole stone wall. Inside that stone wall are these 2 pieces of basalt. Words have been carved into it that you can't read because they're all weathered. But Dr. Grant knew that beneath those stones were the remains of the guardians of Obake. Obake Park. I've been telling this story for years. One Halloween, I was in Okinawa, and people said, why don't you, the people from Hawaii here, why don't you go and tell them some ghost stories for Halloween? I said, great. I told this story. And when I was done, a guy comes up and says, I know the backstory behind the story of Obake Park. Tell me. He says, well, his granduncle, his grandfather's brother, was part of the 442, the all-Japanese American unit that fought in Europe during World War II in Italy and France. He says when he came back, he was a veteran, and he got his job with the state. He was a heavy equipment operator. He was there to help build parks. Now, back in the 50s, they basically dropped you off at the place where you had to build the park with everything you needed, and you didn't go anywhere until the park was finished. You lived on site. And so the crew was like plantation workers from the Philippines and a whole bunch of other people, other veterans. And when they got dumped off at this place, one of the Filipino guys got kind of, hey, something's weird here. Something's funny about this place. And that night they started hearing music. Old, ancient Hawaiian music, chanting. And they go, yeah, something's weird about this place. They didn't know what was going on, but they knew something was weird about the land. But they had a job to do. So they started, leveling the land, clearing, they cut down the trees, cleared off the trees, and with the bulldozers, they were grading the land. And all of a sudden, this guy's driving the bulldozer, all of a sudden, poof, bulldozer just disappeared. Oh, they were burned. The bulldozer had fallen into this big hole. And I said, hey, you okay? Okay, yeah, I'm okay. The bulldozer just fell through. It had fallen through the top of a lava tube. Now, when lava goes from the volcano down to the sea, this molten rock flows down. And sometimes the top part cools off. This is like molten rock, and the top part cools off, but the middle part is still hot, it's still moving toward the ocean. And when lava finally flows down, what you end up with is a hollow stone tube, a lava tube. And what this bulldozer had done, graded over the top of it, through the surface, through the roof of this lava tube, and fallen through. The guy's looking around, the dust is clearing, he's looking around, and what he sees are bones. Oh, this is a Hawaiian burial site. Ancient Hawaiians believed that your mana, your spiritual power, was held in your bones, especially your long bones. And they didn't want anyone messing with the mana of their relatives, so they went and hid the bones in places where they could rest. And someone had probably found the edges of this lava tube and had carried the bones of their ancestors in and had buried them here. And they had graded right over the top of it and fell amongst them. Oh, they said, what are we going to do now? I don't know. They got a crane, they lifted the bones around, it was okay. But that night, they started hearing chanting, speaking, people speaking in Hawaiian. They said, oh, we got to do something about this. So he said, my granduncle, he didn't know what to do, but he got some food from dinner. He took it to the edge of the hole, put it down, and said, we're sorry, we didn't want to disturb you, but here, this for you, please, don't hurt us. And it was quiet. Every night while he's there, he did the same thing. And now the park was finished. We can't just leave this hole open. Okay, we'll do something. Because they filled in the hole. They built that low stone wall. They put those markers with words carved into them. And that's the story behind Obake Park.
It's always sad when these concerts come to an end, but the festival is just starting. Our doors will open at 8 o'clock tomorrow. The story store and the silent auction, there'll be someone at the registration desk to sell you tickets. Our workshops and concerts start tomorrow morning at 9. There will be a concert here and workshops in this building. There will also be something for children at the Emily Fowler Library, and there will be another special concert with the Texas Folklore Society over in the Women's Building. So we will be in those 3 buildings all weekend long. hope that she'll come back. But before we go, please give another round of applause for all of our tellers.